Hi everyone, welcome back to 90 Days of Good News. This is day 55 of the New Testament 90, and today we look at Matthew chapters 22, 23, and 24. Now, yesterday we covered the theme of becoming humble in order to follow Jesus, with the example of the rich man who came to Jesus wanting to know how to become a part of the kingdom. And Jesus' advice to him was to sell all that he had and to give all the money to the poor and to follow him. We were also given this instruction by being told that Jesus welcomes little children because the kingdom belongs to such as these. And this reminds us of the wonderful way that kids see the world and the humbling questions that they can sometimes ask. Now today, Jesus is questioned again and again and again by the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who are desperate to catch him saying something unlawful. And however, by speaking in parables, Jesus reveals that they, not he, have been living and acting contrary to the ways of God. We also receive more descriptions and warnings about the end times, so it's a really heavy day today. So yeah, let's get started. By praying, Father in heaven, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for what we're going to read today, and I just pray that you would help each of us to learn more about you each time we come to your word. I just pray for a real sense of your presence in each room as they listen and read along with me, and that you would be with me here as well and just help us to interpret what you're saying. And just again, we ask for wisdom and understanding and your blessing over your words today. I just pray for each person that's reading along with me, that you would just bless them and you would give them the real sense of wonder and hope that comes from getting to know you better. And I just ask for your presence in their rooms. Amen. So, Matthew chapter 22. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused. Then he sent some more servants and said, 'Tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened cattle have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants and ill-treated them. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said, "Oh, you're kidding me." So, chapter 22. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, chapter 22. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell him to come, but they refused to. Then he sent some more servants and said, 'Tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen fattened, cattle have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants and ill-treated them and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. So go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find.' So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people that they could find, the bad as well as the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. He asked, 'How did you get here without wearing wedding clothes, friend?' The man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, 'Tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are invited, but few are chosen.' Then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians. 'Teacher,' they said, 'we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others, and because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the poll tax to Caesar or not?' But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, 'You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax.' They brought to him a denarius and asked him, 'Whose image is this and whose inscription?' 'Caesar's,' they replied. Then he said to them, 'So give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's.' When they heard this, they were amazed, so they left him and went away. That same day, the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him with a question. 'Teacher,' they said, Moses told us that if a man dies without having children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up offspring for him. Now there were 7 brothers among us. The first one married and died, and since he had no children, he left his wife to his brother. The same thing happened to the second and third, right on down to the 7th. Finally, the woman died. Now then, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be of the 7, since all of them were married to her? Jesus replied, "You are in error, because you do not know the Scriptures or the power of God. At the resurrection, people will not marry or be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven. But about the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what God has said to you? I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living." When the crowds heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments." While the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them, "What do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he?" "The son of David," they replied. He said to them, "How is it then that David, speaking by the Spirit, calls him Lord? For he says, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet.' If David calls him Lord, how can he be his son?" No one said a word to him in reply, and from that day on, no one dared ask him any more questions. Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, so you must be careful to do everything they tell you, but do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders. They themselves are not willing to lift a finger or move them. Everything they do is done for the people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and their tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and most important seats in synagogues, and they love to be greeted with respect in marketplaces and to be called rabbi by others. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. You do not call anyone on earth father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant, for those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Woe to you, teachers of the law and the Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door on the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much a child of hell as you are. Woe to you, blind guides! You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by that oath. You blind fools! Which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes that gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But anyone who swears by the gift on the altar is bound by that oath. You blind men! Which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore anyone who swears by the altar swears by it and everything on it, and anyone who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And anyone who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides! You strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside they are full of bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have taken part with them in the shedding of the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those people who murdered the prophets. Go ahead then and complete what your ancestors started. You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? Therefore I am sending you prophets and sages and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify, others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town. And so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly I tell you, all this will come upon this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often have I longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate, for I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when the disciples came to him to call his attention to its buildings. Do you see all these things? He asked. Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and said, Tell us, when will this happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Jesus answered, Watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nations will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginnings of birth pains. You will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of the wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. See, when you are standing in the holy place, the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down and take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress, unequalled from the beginning of the world until now, never to be equalled again. For if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if there is anyone who says to you, Look, here is the Messiah, or here he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you in advance. So if anyone tells you, There he is, out in the desert, do not go out. Or here he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning comes from the east, is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, the vultures will gather. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then all peoples on earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call. They will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs become tender and the leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. But about that day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, the people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day that Noah entered the ark. They knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. This is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in one field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill, one will be taken and the other left. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch, and would not have let his house be broken into. So you must also be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household, to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose the servant is wicked and says to himself, "My master is staying away a long time." He then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect, and an hour that he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So that is the end of our readings for today, and there was quite a lot in there, so I will try and break it down as quickly as possible. So we have a lot of challenges from and towards the Pharisees. A lot of the questions that they ask Jesus actually end up revealing quite a lot about themselves. The Sadducees, for example, almost seem to be mocking Jesus in his teaching about resurrection, but actually what he sort of turns around and is, he's so wise to it, he's so aware of what they're saying, that he's just like, no, I'm not going to answer that question, because you've just twisted it around. You have no understanding of the resurrection because you choose not to even believe it. So I'm not going to answer that question that you've asked. Stop being daft. It's just a really, I feel like it's quite a snappy little story of just like Jesus being like, no, I'm wise, so you stop it. We kind of move on a little bit. He is challenged with the question of what is the greatest commandment, to which he answers, love the Lord your God and love your neighbour as yourself. Now actually a lot of the things that we then in the next chapter learn about the Pharisees, actually if you compare it to those 2 very important commandments, you start to recognise that Pharisees were not practicing what they were preaching. As Jesus very rightly says, he talks about them being more obsessed with ritual than with pursuing and acting on justice and mercy and righteousness, and turning people almost in the wrong direction because they're given false teachings. They're given teachings that are completely contrary, and they're living completely contrary to the way that God lives. And there's just the comparisons between these 2 vital laws. Now actually, back in just a little bit of a history lesson, there are about 613, I might have that wrong, roughly 613 laws in the Old Testament, and Jesus is saying, without these 2 laws, the other 611 laws are pointless. They are worth nothing, because each of those laws is just something that helps you to perform these 2. And these 2 help you to perform them. It's basically what Jesus is saying is, if you do anything without these 2, without loving the Lord your God with all your heart, mind and soul, and without loving your neighbour, then what's the point in doing those things? Those are the most important things that you can do. So don't do something else unless it's because of one of these. And he then sort of goes on and lists a lot of things that the Pharisees do that just do not lay up with those 2 laws. A couple of examples are, he talks about them being whitewashed. They big themselves up, they look amazing, but actually on the inside they're not following God, they're not loving God, they're not really doing anything for God. They're just doing everything to exalt themselves. And as Jesus has already said several times, those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. There's some real warnings against wrong living and wrong attitudes as well. So leading people in the wrong direction, there's a real serious there's a lot of really serious passages about being somebody who teaches people the wrong thing, who does not teach the things of God but teaches something that's completely contrary to that. It's such a dangerous place to be, a teacher of other people, and to say something that is against the word of God or against those 2 commandments. And he's just pointing out again and again in this list of woes, there's 7 woes which I won't get into too much, but he really is warning people against, do not live in this way, do not live inwardly or outwardly the way that they do, because it is all false and it's going to get them nowhere. Instead, these 2 commandments are so important, and it's really, like I said, really highlighted. Now towards the end there, the disciples ask Jesus about the signs of the end times. Now, this is a really difficult one to do briefly, but I will try. So he begins by talking about, okay, there will be the beginnings of the signs, which will be like the beginnings of birth pains. Now, if you think about a woman in labour, not too hard because it's not the best experience in the world, but you get the best thing out of it, yay. The beginnings of labour are uncomfortable, sometimes painful, and long. It takes a long time for it to get started. I know some people have those weird, like, oh, okay, contraction started and then I gave birth. Like, I don't want to hear that, quite frankly, because that is such a rare thing. But for the majority of birth pains, they are a long process, and they're not always super painful. Sometimes it's just a bit of, oh, that's really uncomfortable. Oh, that doesn't feel quite normal, and there's a little bit of, oh, what's going on? But sometimes it's really painful, and it gets more rapid, more painful, more happens the further along, the closer that you get to the actual the final stage, which is sometimes half an hour, sometimes 5 minutes. That final stage is immediately before that. You've had this rapid succession, so you've got the contractions just going doop 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 doop, and then all of a sudden they go do 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 do. So do you like my little description of it? And that's what he's saying is, this is going to build up. There'll be war, there'll be famine, there'll be all sorts of horrible things. I mean, people, well, I could say you could argue, but right now we are probably living at a time where one of those signs is happening at the moment. The coronavirus is spreading. Hundreds of thousands of people have been in pain, have suffered, and have died, and it's been horrible to watch this worldwide thing happen. But you could definitely argue that is a part of these birth pains, these pains that are going to lead us towards the very end times. He talks about the abomination being set up. Now, this seems to be the major, it's coming, this like one of those moments. It's building up and building up more and more and more. And the abomination is actually supposed to be, I don't know if it's Satan himself or a servant of Satan, but who sets himself up as being great and set himself up in Jerusalem. Now, there's a lot of prophecies about this in the book of Daniel. I would definitely recommend you read that, and there will be more on this subject when we look at the book of Revelation towards the end of our 90 days. Now, what this moment here is a warning to people who are followers of Jesus, that when that happens, when Satan sets himself up as what he sets himself up as, go into hiding, run, keep away, because this is the point where persecution of Christians will take, and it will just rocket, it will skyrocket, and it will be horrendous. And he talks about, don't go back for your belongings, just trust you'll be okay, you just have to hide. Now, he does say, I'm going to make this time short, I'm not going to let this last for long, it will be a short amount of time, and we are given that as a promise from Jesus. That's a wonderful hope. And he also most amazingly promises that he will come, and he won't just come and it won't be subtle. So the whole, oh, don't trust people when they say, oh, there he is, there he is, there he is. What he doesn't want us to be brought out of a place where we're protected and safe, out into the open, so that we can be painfully and hurtfully persecuted and probably killed. Instead, what he says is, it'll be obvious. I will make myself known. You will know that I'm here. Don't worry, it's going to be very clear when I'm here. And a lot of people have read a few of these passages. I don't want to say wrong, but wrong. And they've called it they've given names to, two people will be in a field and one person will be taken, the other one will be left. There's some philosophies on that I have to admit I just can't stick by at all. But what Jesus is basically saying here is, look, before I gather my people, so the believers, the people who love Jesus, the people who trust in Jesus and have trusted in him through all of the persecution time, I will come and it will be obvious. You will know that I am here. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there just because I could go on for absolutely ages and ages, but I don't want to bore you all to death, and this is already quite a long video. So yeah, I'll see you all tomorrow. We're going to continue with the book of Matthew, and we are getting closer and closer to the end of Holy Week, towards the Last Supper and to the crucifixion. So some really sort of deep chapters that we're going to be looking into over the next few days. So yeah, I hope all of you are keeping safe, and I will see you later. Bye.